Top diplomats from the US, Russia and other Arctic nations are holding a meeting of the Arctic Council in Finland this week to discuss policies for the region. There are fears the melting of the northern ice cap will wreak havoc on coastal communities, but it'll also unlock vast stores of wealth that had previously been difficult to reach. Russia estimates there's up to $30 trillion worth of minerals like zinc, iron and other metals buried in the Arctic. The US says as much as 30% of the world's undiscovered natural gas reserves is in the Arctic, much of it in territory that Russia controls. The disappearance of ice is also creating new shipping lanes. Last year, 20 million tonnes of cargo passed through the Northern Sea route, which opened up during August and September.
China's pattern of aggressive behavior elsewhere should inform what we do and how it might treat the Arctic. We're concerned about Russia's claims over the international waters of the Northern Sea route, including its newly announced plans to connect it with China's maritime Silk Road.
Let's get more on this now with Lars Kullerud in Arendal, Norway. He's the president of the University of the Arctic, which is a cooperative network of universities and research institutes that focus on the Arctic region. Welcome back to Money Talks, Lars. Let's start with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's comments on China first. He gave some dire warnings about China's ambitions for the Arctic region. Tell us a bit more about what Beijing wants to achieve there.
Well, it's quite remarkable that a huge country like China actually have issued its own Arctic strategy. It is quite rare that such things happens. So in that sense, it's clear that they have ambitions and will for the North. The Arctic is a very logical part for China in terms of routing shipments of goods to Europe and East Coast North America. So in that sense, it is a strategic important part for their future. But the Arctic is also an enormous potential of resources, and resource-hungry South will need resources from the North for all futures. And I guess this is one of the reasons why they're so eager being part of the Arctic Council and that family.
In his address to the Arctic Council, he warned that China may ensnare Arctic nations in its so-called debt trap with its infrastructure spending. It also warned of possible environmental destruction that Beijing might cause in the region. Do you share the same concerns?
Well, at the moment, China has a very clear environment and pure research-oriented agenda, just like European Union do the same. But there is no question that the Arctic interest of larger nations outside the Arctic has other motives beyond being friendly to the North. So we cannot know what it leads to. A challenge for the Arctic is that investments in infrastructure and necessarily investment then to take out resources for those who wish to do so. It requires economic means and capacity. And if the economic capacity within the Arctic 8 countries is not large enough, it is open space then for China and other investors into the Arctic.
Now, Pompeo also warned against Russia's ambitions in the Arctic. Russia, of course, is a member of the Arctic Council. What does Moscow want to achieve there?
Well, Russia, it is quite simple. The Arctic is a huge portion of Russia, and the resources of the Arctic is a big portion of Russian GDP. So they need the Arctic as a resource pool for the economy and boost the economy of Russia. So growth in Russia is dependent on using the Arctic. That also means that Russia needs resources from the Arctic to be sold to clients and customers in the rest of the world, being particularly Asia, but it can also be Europe and South America and North America for that sake. So Russia is very much dependent on there is a global market and demand for resources from places like you're showing now, Zabeta, this huge gas plant in the Russian Arctic.
And do you believe there's a safe and sustainable way to exploit the Arctic for its natural resources?
Well, there is always challenges exploiting natural resources in pristine nature as well as in populated places. This doesn't come without conflict. So there is no conflict-free solution to that. There are quite sustainable or responsible ways to do so. I think the biggest challenge for people of the north is the conflict between traditional land use, the people who used to live there forever, and people coming from the south to take out the resources. But even they sometimes have an interest in taking out resources because it produces jobs, economic means for building a new future. So it needs to be done in dialogue and in a way where the North feels itself to be part of decision making and not only observing that somebody take out their resources.
Okay, Lars Kullerud in Norway, thank you again for your time on Money Talks.